right, everyone, welcome back to Hot Route Takes. I'm your host, Chase Owens, along with my good friends, Brian Sarver, Christian Mills, here with you today to rack up the final regular season week of football. This is our final recap episode. We won't spend a whole lot of time because, quite frankly, there were some games that had no playoff implications. But now that we know the stage is set, we'll kind of look at how we got there in week 18 because there were some key games that really altered matchups for the playoffs. And then we'll talk on later in the pod a little bit on the already fired head coaches across the NFL. Been a couple today, sure to be more as this offseason continues, I'm sure. But we'll touch on those things towards the end of the pod. And if we have a little time, maybe hit some other areas depending on our timing. So we're going to jump right into week 18, the final week of regular season football. It began with a Saturday matchup between my Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Ravens had clinched the one seed, as we all previewed in the preview episode. They did not play a lot of starters. Tyler Huntley under center. That said, the game went to the fourth quarter tied at 7. The Pittsburgh offense just really struggling. I know it was quite sloppy conditions, so not to be surprised there. But in the end, big touchdown to Deontay Johnson. That gets them the lead, and they pull out a 17-10 victory. Ends up being a key win for them because, as we all know by now, they have found themselves into the playoffs now, thanks to some help they got on Sunday. So we're going to get right into the one last key Saturday game. There was two. The second one was really the key one of the AFC South, and I'll let both of you touch on this if you care to. The Houston Texans pull out a 23-19 victory on the road to get to 10-7 and eventually clinch the AFC South thanks to the help they got on Sunday. But at the time, it was basically winner of this game, you got a playoff spot. Loser, you're out. Outside looking in, great year, but you're young and maybe better luck next year. This came down to a big fourth down play. Gardner Minshew can't hit the backup running back. No Jonathan Taylor on the field. That's really the big talking point. But C.J. Stroud willed the team to victory, and it was a very entertaining game to say the least. Any notes from this game, guys, or really the microcosm of what your thoughts for the Colts since their season is over? Very impressive, a 9-8 year considering no Anthony Richardson. But we'll talk about Houston in a later time as we preview the playoffs in our next episode. But just give me some thoughts on the Colts and what went down in this game that kept them from making the playoffs.
Christian, that's one of your teams, isn't it?
Yeah, man, I got you, man. So, in the preview, I did say Jonathan Taylor, I expected to have a big day, and he did deliver. But my biggest takeaway for where I think they kind of lost the game is, Josh Downs is your leading receiver. I love the guy, rookie wide receiver, but Michael Pittman did not have the impact that I expected him to have on this game. He only had the 5 catches, 44 yards. But, Gardner Minshew, could have played a little bit better. Granted, he didn't have any interceptions, but 13 for 24, only 141. But, I could say he could have played better, but in reality, it was just how great Jonathan Taylor was playing. And really, I think that you could argue it really came down to, like Chase said, the 4th and 1, that play. You can say Jonathan Taylor, Gardner Minshew saying he underthrew it. So, there's fingers pointing at certain players, but certain players are pointing them at themselves. So, I think this game really just came down to that play. It was until that point, it was whoever wanted to win it, and the Colts just on that play just for whatever reason didn't click on what they really thought was going to happen. Once he called it, he had the first down. But also, that was only for the first down. He had a couple more yards for an actual touchdown. So, doesn't mean they were going to win the game, but I think my biggest takeaway is just really what Chase said. Jonathan Taylor not being on the field for that play is just a big question mark for me.
Yeah, interesting. And ultimately, Houston pulls this game out, and their reward is an AFC South division title. None of us really saw that coming. C.J. Stroud having really stamping his Rookie of the Year award, I think, with his season. And that's all a result of the Sunday action. And the first key game we're going to hit on here is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had the driver's seat. They had the win, and you clinched the AFC South. But they did not take care of business against the Tennessee Titans in Nashville. Derrick Henry's probably final game as a Titan, and it was a very poetic swan song for him. 19 carries, 153 yards. He dominated the ground. And Jacksonville's offense, what have we said time and time again? Not much rushing game. Trevor Lawrence, a couple interceptions. He missed a big-time throw to Calvin Ridley that could have helped him win this game. So maybe we don't touch on Tennessee, but let's touch on Jacksonville and some of your thoughts, Brian, for their season. Finishing 9-8, not making the playoffs with Trevor Lawrence after an 8-3 start. They lose 5 of their last 6, man. Tough. I know injuries came and play into that, but not where they wanted to be considering the steps they took last year in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me is Doug Peterson getting off to a hot start after the previous year, being off to a slow start and then catching fire at the end of the season. I think a lot of what it had to do was the play from Trevor Lawrence and not having the running game to lean on, and then Trevor Lawrence getting banged up, and then later in the year not being maybe 100%, forcing things, trying to make things happen, trying to be a playmaker, because that's what they needed from him. You know, the defense wasn't playing to the standard they maybe thought they had as far as personnel and coaching and things like that, and they just fired their defensive staff. So it's going to be interesting to see what direction they go in as far as the defense, but I think Doug Peterson deserves another year. I think his job is definitely safe. I also would like to think Trevor Lawrence's job is definitely safe as well. You know, he showed plenty of glimpses of potential and what he can be as a player. He's just got to cut back on these turnovers that has plagued his career so far, particularly the fumbles. But in this game, he was just inaccurate, I think, for a lot of the night. He missed several throws that I thought were throws he should make, particularly out routes. It seemed like he was just sailing them. And so you got to play cleaner football in this league. So I think Jacksonville is a very talented team. They'll be back in the running next year. Honestly, I think they probably will be the favorite to win the division, but we'll see. They got to definitely be healthy, and Trevor Lawrence needs to clean up his play. But Travis Etienne, 3.6 yards per carry, and it's something we talked about this year. I think in games where he averages over 4 yards a carry, their win rate's a lot higher. So disappointing season, though, for sure for Jacksonville.
Yeah, I would say 90% of people, if not higher, had Jacksonville winning that division, really running away with it, especially after the 8-3 start. But those injuries, that poor performance against better teams in the AFC really come back to haunt them. And I think it's justified because Houston's been one of the more entertaining, one of the better teams, one of the better stories. So glad to see them rewarded and get into the playoff mix with the AFC South division title. As we flip to the NFC South and get the division winner on that side, it come down to the Saints, Falcons, and Bucks on the final week. All had a chance to win this division. The Saints and Falcons were playing each other, and it was a blowout. I mean, it was close for the majority of the game, majority of the first half, but then the Saints got a pick off Desmond Ridder in the second half. Offense just kept chugging along. Derek Carr, really good day, actually. And they put up 48 points and blew the Falcons out. But none of that mattered because Tampa Bay took care of business on the road against the Carolina Panthers. Won the biggest victory, a 9-0 margin. But defense played a heck of a game. Bryce Young didn't even get over 100 yards, I believe, which, you know, if there's a microcosm of the Panthers season, that's kind of the Bryce Young performance in Week 18. So kudos to the Bucks for getting that done. A great defensive performance. They will now be hosting a playoff game. Christian, Bucks really seem like the most consistent team, definitely the most consistent offense in this division all season long. What propelled them in Week 18, and what things did you see all year that left you encouraged because you've been riding the Baker Mayfield train all season long, man?
Yeah, I mean, my big thing is I know their defense has been shaky, but their head coach, that's his specialty, and it's really been Baker Mayfield taking over the offense. And I seem that him and the offensive coordinators really found something with White, getting him started later into the season. And I mean, crazy enough, and I really thought about it, it's kind of they kept the offense with Brady what they kept for this year, if you really think about it. To last year, it was Leonard Fournette being the lead guy, being the back, doing the catching, and White took that role and really ran with it this season, did great. I will say this game against the Panthers, and I mean, I will, kind of look ahead. They're playing the Eagles for their, for that, but not going too far ahead. So I just think Mike Evans getting double teamed and really out of this game and then still finding a way to win is a good thing, but it's kind of scary saying that's against the Panthers. But I mean, moving forward, I think Chris Godwin's getting more involved. Now you got Mike Evans being who he's been all year. And then Chase Edmonds did bust a couple, good runs, and that's kind of what he's been for them too this year. It's just every once in a while gets one good run. He averaged 6.8 in this game. So I just think the biggest thing for them is just moving forward is Baker not committing turnovers and doing what he's done to get them to this point moving forward.
I like it. A division we probably picked out as the weakest when we all did our preview for each division before the season started, and that really held true. But credit to the Bucks, they started off hot and they had a poor run in that middle stretch right there, but they rebounded and they rolled off 5 straight wins at one point and eventually closed it out in Week 18. So credit to Baker, a guy many people wrote off, and good for him beating the Panthers, a team he was on last season, to clinch this division. So another NFC team clinching a playoff berth was the Green Bay Packers. Brian, you did not hop off this train midway through when things really looked bleak, and Jordan Love's bounce back in the second half was really spoken to existence by you, I would say, because you never faltered in your belief in him. And despite the weapons being down in and out, each guy's and receiver core and running backs and all that, his solid performance stayed true the whole second half of the year. He finishes that season off with a 17-9 victory at home to get the final NFC wildcard spot. Bears gave him a good game. They've been a good team in the second half, but ultimately not enough. Why did you see the Packers turning this thing around, and why is Jordan Love a possible playoff threat to some powerhouse NFC teams?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the well kind of here, and it goes back to Green Bay just being able to allow their quarterbacks to sit and marinate and be able to be ready to play when they hit the field. And being able to learn under a guy like Aaron, I think, played a lot into his early success. And also having a year with these receivers, even though Aaron Rodgers was there, he was in the building. He was able to get some chemistry with these guys. And as the year progressed, you saw it get better and better. And then, having the coaching staff that's in place, they've been in place. It's not a new coaching staff. They know what they're doing. Mike LaFleur's a great play caller, and being able to just groom these guys and really just allow them to grow with each other in the offense. I think it was something that was nice to see as the year progressed. But Jordan Love being able to spread the ball around, and that's kind of been the calling card all year. He doesn't have a top target. Preparing for this team can be difficult because you know that he's going to spread the ball across the whole yard. And having a healthy Aaron Jones come back into the mix is huge for this team, being able to have that number one weapon, really, and having a rushing attack that they did in this game, having 111 yards on the ground from Jones, and then Jordan Love having 316 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. Well, he did have a fumble lost. But other than that, no picks, and just, playing his brand of football. I think he makes high-level throws each and every week that he plays, and he's avoiding mistakes. I think if he can continue to do those two things, the Packers can continue to be a really good team, and I like their first-round matchup in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's interesting. Great turnaround for the Packers this season. The last division or playoff spot that was really up in the air, and as far as the NFC side of things, was the NFC East. Both the Eagles and Cowboys entered with 11 wins in Week 18, and ultimately things boiled down to how the second half's been going. Dallas takes care of business in emphatic fashion against the Commanders. They clinched the East. All they needed was a win. They didn't need any help. Whereas the Eagles needed the Cowboys to lose and to win, and neither happened. They got blown out by the Giants. Jalen Hurts suffers a broken middle finger in this game. I don't know his status. I believe he's going to be good to go, but obviously something to keep an eye on come playoff time. The Eagles really trending in the wrong direction. Guys, I'll let either of you take this one. What happened in the second half of the year? Because the Eagles had this division by the throat, and the Cowboys just never died. They stayed true and eventually won that head-to-head and kept playing sound football to take this division from Philadelphia. So what happened in the second half of the year that flipped this division on its head, guys?
Christian, you want to take that one?
Man, not really, man. Not my guy, Jalen. My big thing, I mean, me and Brian's talked about it off the pod. I think the Eagles' biggest weakness, and I think it is something that teams I think have really keyed on, and that's their linebackers. They're not great, they're not good, they're kind of mediocre, and I think teams have really abused that, definitely in the passing game, but I think even in the run game, and definitely, I mean, this is crazy to say, but their defensive line is not what it was. I think everybody will agree with that this year, at least in the second half. The first half
Jordan
of the year, it
Davis.
kind of
Yeah.
did look like that, but the second half, Jordan Davis is one of those guys that just kind of fell off. Like, and then I
Yes.
know Cox had the injury; they lost him for a couple weeks, and then once that D line got beat up, I think that's when like that second phase that I talk about, the linebackers got exposed a lot. So I think that's their biggest thing, and just offensively, I mean, you talked about it a couple pods, Chase. Is just the run game. Yes, I mean Swift had a great year, but it wasn't like it was in years past. And they're running the ball, letting Jalen Hurts have his play action, big plays. And now we're talking about A.J. Brown getting hurt that game with a knee injury. Jalen Hurts is getting hurt. And I mean, you could argue honestly, too, that the offensive line kind of took a step down, too, these last couple of weeks and hadn't been a great unit like we thought they were, too. So my biggest thing, and I mean, crazy to say about the Eagles, but the last couple of weeks, both sides of the trenches have not been what we've all kind of looked and respect the Eagles to be.
I would agree. I think that was their biggest downfall this year. And the Cowboys, the offense really was pretty much a good unit all year. I think they had trouble on the road at times, but that offense is a top 5 unit. And the defense just was very opportunistic and got turnovers. Deron Bland, Gilmore, all those guys, and Micah Parsons, great pass rusher. So I think the Cowboys played better football all season, and they deserve this division, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Anything to add there, Brian? No?
The only thing I would say is, like Christian kind of touched on, the Eagles, their identity, what they were known for last year was really dominating in the trenches, and that's not what they were able to do this year. And then also Jalen Hurts being banged up for a good portion of the season, with the knee injury, shoulder injury, I believe, and a finger injury, and not really allowing him to play his brand of football, forcing him to be a passer. And he can throw the football, but I think that it's his versatility that we've touched on this podcast that really allows him to be a really good quarterback in the NFL. And if he's forced into situations where he's banged up and is forced to win from the pocket, in situations where the defense knows he's going to have to pass, that's not Jalen Hurts' game, and it kind of showed up this year. So,
Yep, and the last division, the last playoff spot we have to talk about here is the AFC East. It came down to Sunday Night Football, the Bills and Dolphins prime time. We talked in the preview, the Dolphins had the lead for much of the year. Funny enough, Brian, I don't know if you've checked this. Me and you were tied for game picks going into that game. The final regular season game. I stuck with the Bills because I had them preseason winning the division, and it's a close, tightly contested game all the way down to the wire. A few turnovers from each quarterback early on in the first half, and the Bills end up coming out victorious by 21-14 final, take the AFC East with a 11-win season. And since they beat Miami both times in the regular season, they hold the tiebreaker. Miami falls to a wild card despite an 11-win season. So, Brian, I know it's tough to talk on now, but what's your disappointment from that game, from the second half of the year? Buffalo really just didn't allow you guys room for error since they reeled off 5 straight in the year. It's got to be disappointing, but at the same time, are you happy that your team is at least in the playoffs? I know you're a bit banged up, but hopefully you can still make a run at this thing, or no?
The way I was going to touch on the game first, I thought that the Bills gave us every opportunity to win this game. That's the way I saw it. I didn't think Josh Allen particularly played a clean game whatsoever. I think that they had many miscues. They had plenty of opportunities to score. A James Cook halfback, not a wheel route, but it was a forget what it's called. But anyway, it's like a corner from the halfback position.
Right before the first half.
Right in the breadbasket.
Yeah.
Great throw by Josh Allen. Drop touchdown. He missed Stephon Diggs down the field. Should have been a big play. And then had several other boneheaded plays. I don't know what he saw, and he tried to throw it up and really gave us opportunities to stay in this game. The offense in the first half, I thought played very well, running the football, the RPOs off of it, play action off of it. I thought Tua had some boneheaded plays in the first half, but I thought he settled in well afterwards and had a couple good plays. But just in general, the defense is just missing so much now. I mean, Xavier Howard not being there, your first, second, third, and fifth edge rushers being out. Jerome Baker went out again in this game. Javon Hollins and both of our safeties were questionable to start the game. But, next man up mentality. But at the end of the day, this team versus what it was earlier in the season is completely different on the defensive side of the ball. And we got next to no pressure for a good portion of the night. Christian Wilkins made a couple of big plays. But, they were able to keep the offense on the field. They were able to convert on third down. So the defense, as the night progressed, was more and more tired. And the offense continued to have more success as the night went on. And then what really I think was the difference in the game was Miami's offense in the second half, just being non-existent, not being able to run the football, drops from the receivers, Tua just trying to make something happen, throws the ball down the field, throws another interception. So I think from the Dolphins side of things, the meltdown really, if you're going to point fingers at one individual, I think you got to point it at McDaniel and Tua. Like you can't separate the two. You don't know who's calling the plays and who's making the decisions on exactly where the ball is going. But I thought, hey, man, you got to move the ball there. I mean, the Bills gave you this game. If the offense operates at any level of consistency in the second half, you win the football game. Of course, the special teams, you lost there. You gave up a punt return. But, I mean, the Bills scored the same amount of points on offense as Miami did, yet they had the ball the whole game, essentially, especially in the second half. So, I mean, as far as the playoffs and where this team is heading, Miami, I think short term this season, it's hard to look at this team and feel confident, especially considering the amount of injuries on the defensive side of the ball and the offense just losing its footing. I mean, they're in a slump. It is what it is. This is the wrong time of year to be in a slump. I mean, you were hot for a good portion of the season. You suffer some injuries on the offensive line. Now you're trying to find your identity again. It seems like Tua's off his game. McDaniel's kind of having some questionable play calls here and there, including a halfback pass for no reason when the running game is working. Didn't understand things like that. But I think big picture, if you zoom out, you realize where you were last year, limping into the playoffs. You're back to limping into the playoffs this year. I think you have to make some personnel changes as far as the training staff and also going forward, not looking for these cheaper deals for guys that are good players but have injury histories. You got to be able to maintain that chemistry and stability. And when you're constantly shuffling your players in and out of the lineup on both sides of the ball, that becomes very difficult, especially when other teams who do have their players are gelling as the season continues. Like, for instance, the Bills' offensive line has not missed a single start all season long. I mean, that's critical in your offense. Yeah. So I don't mean to go on a rant here, but the other side, if you look at the positive side, your quarterback just led the NFL in passing, led the NFL in completion percentage, threw 30 touchdowns. You got to take a step back and realize this isn't all on Tua. Even though that's what the media is going to talk about, that's what the fans are going to talk about because he didn't come up in a big-time situation. But understand this. It's not just Tua that lost the game. They gave up a punt return touchdown. They also, there's a fluke play in there where the ball gets tipped up in there and Trent Sherfield catches the ball in the back of the end zone. And how fitting. That guy hadn't had a touchdown all season long and gets one against his former team. But, man, it's a rough time at this point in time to be a Dolphins fan with the expectations, the way the season played out. But take a step back, realize this is McDaniel's second season coaching. He's a young head coach. You got a young quarterback. This is not the end of the world. The Dolphins will be back, and not to say stronger, but this isn't the end of the world.
But yeah, I mean, Christian, before you get your take in here, I mean, your things aren't going to be in your favor. Like, you're not going to be favored in many matchups in the playoffs due to injuries, but everyone's 0-0 in the playoffs. Just takes one good game, play better special teams, take care of the ball better. Miami's still a very good team. They can still, despite the injuries, find themselves playing deep into the playoffs. I know things have looked bad these last few weeks, but it is a clean slate come playoff times. I've seen so many Ravens, as good as things looked this last month, the hard schedule we ran through in the second half of the year, we can go out and lay an egg after a divisional round or after a wild card weekend layoff and then divisional round lay an egg against a lesser team, quote, and the season will be considered a failure. So I'm just trying to paint the picture and lift your spirits here a little bit here, because I know it's frustrating to watch your team get caught from behind when you have the grasp on the division. You even play for the 1 seed and all these things, but it's just a new season now. It's a new season now. I think you are beat up, but Tua is healthy this time for the playoffs. Just hope he brings it and plays good football in this next game, because it's going to be a good matchup. Y'all have a tough matchup, but I think it's going to be a good one. And we'll break down that in the preview show itself. But that's all I wanted to get off my chest. I know things are, like you said, bleak for Dolphins fans, but I'm trying to perk all of their spirits up a little bit here. So, Christian, you saw this play out, man. You've kind of given to a hard time, but you realize how good Miami, Tyreek Hill, when they're clicking, they're a really good team. What happened in this game? What happened to them in the second half of the year, from your eyes, that allowed Buffalo to come back, win this game, and win this division?
I will say, to start out, man, I just want to start with a story. It was the night of December the 3rd. The Eagles were 10-2. The Dolphins were 9-3. The Bills were 6-6. Only one of these teams won their division. All right. But besides the story time, my biggest takeaway, I think Brian will agree. I'm not going to, beat Brian down while he's out, but Buffalo schedule versus Miami, I will say Buffalo had a nice road ahead. And you could argue Miami, they did what they were supposed to at the beginning of the year. They had what Buffalo had at the end of the year. Just, I guess you can argue at the beginning, but at the end, and that's when you play those great teams, that's when these injuries are going to come. But to kind of go against what Brian said about the Buffalo's offensive line, I agree with that part, but just, their defense got ate up this year. A lot. And then even that game, they lost Douglas, and then y'all started going after Jackson right when he came in the game, and that step-up mentality, he did it that game. Y'all try to catch him. I think it was twice on Tyreek Hill. He did have a heads-up play with the pass interference. People probably didn't like the call, but, I liked it. I think it was a heads-up play by him. I think Brian would agree. If he didn't get the flag thrown, Tyreek Hill was going to the house. But I just think my biggest thing was Miami had opportunities. It's like what Brian said. I agree with Miami had the opportunities multiple times. Definitely that last drive of the game when Buffalo just kept going for it. They knew, hey, we're just going to keep going. And then ultimately they didn't get it that one time. But I just think, Josh Allen, he played Josh Allen ball. He had the good, the ugly, and then the amazing. And I think – Josh Allen knew to beat this team and how great their defensive line has been. Granted, the edges are not there, but still just the defensive line, it's going to be tough to run against Miami. And he knew that. James Cook couldn't get going, and these last couple of weeks he has been able to. So Josh Allen played Josh Allen ball and took it upon himself and took the shots. And ultimately, another guy stepped up at wide receiver. It wasn't a Diggs game. Dalton Kincaid had some amazing catches, but I will say Dalton Kincaid also had a couple plays with Ingram out there on him. Brian was probably not happy with that, being who was sticking him. But Dalton Kincaid is a young star. You cannot have Ingram. What is he, 34, 35-year-old vet now? Cannot be stuck on a rookie out there in open space. And I just think, really what Miami's been, when they do get beat, it's just the big plays. Who has the more big, exciting plays? And ultimately it was Buffalo, and that's what happened this game. I just think moving forward, Brian will say next week, I won't talk about it too much, but KC is going to be a heck of an opponent at KC. I know it's a weather game, but I think, Buffalo's sitting in a good spot right now. Their offense is clicking. Their defense is, yes, it's banged up, but they're playing great as a unit. I don't know what Douglas' status is. We'll talk about that probably more on Wednesday, but Buffalo did what you can say jokingly was saying, they're going to win the division. They're going to come back. Yes, you can take it. I was joking, but it's possible, and they did it.
Yeah, credit to him for not mailing it in. The change in OC going to Joe Brady really started to find a little bit of a ground game there. Defense, despite being banged up, was opportunistic, made its plays when they needed to, and ultimately Bills-Dolphins finished with the same record. It's just those head-to-head matchups. They took care of business at home, and Miami just got to play a better game in Week 18. But the injuries, all those things we can talk about ad nauseum really on this podcast. So That's going to do it for our recap. That has been a ton of games we've recapped this year, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. And we have some extensive previews for each of these playoffs matchups we're going to talk about Wednesday for you guys. And just before we get into our other segment here, I want to preview the matchups themselves and which teams are going to be facing each other for our listeners. AFC, we got Baltimore with the 1 seed and the bye. The 2 seed was Buffalo. They will be hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers, who sneak in at 10 wins. Can't believe the Steelers got to 10 wins this year. It's truly unbelievable, but credit to Mike Tomlin and those guys. They will travel to Buffalo to take on the Bills in Wild Card Weekend. The 3-6 matchup is going to be the AFC West winning Kansas City Chiefs once again taking on Brian's Miami Dolphins. We saw that matchup in Germany earlier this year. Close game, and the Chiefs defense made a few plays, had a fumble return in that game. We'll see how these teams respond. In KC, both teams have kind of been skidding in the second half, so one of them's got to win. Maybe one of whoever comes out gets a little momentum and can make a deep run at this thing. The 4-5 matchup in the AFC, I think, is probably the most interesting. The one I'm really going to be keying in on and watching how these quarterbacks play. It's the AFC South division winning Houston Texans hosting the Cleveland Browns, who I think have one of the best defenses all around in football, and they've got a really hot quarterback who's made a playoff run in his career already. So we'll see how that one plays out in the AFC. Flipping to the NFC side, guys, we've got the Niners with the bye at the 1 seed. The 2 seed is the Cowboys. They will be hosting the Green Bay Packers. They've had a few good playoff matchups between the did Dez catch it, did he not game, the Aaron Rodgers coming back and getting a long field goal out of Mason Crosby with just a few seconds left in Dallas. Some really good matchups previously, and I think this one's going to be a great 2-7 matchup, especially considering how Jordan Love's been playing. The script went crazy for the 3-6 matchup, guys. We got the Lions hosting Matt Stafford, his first game back in Detroit as a visiting player. Detroit's first home playoff game in quite some time, guys. Wow. I mean, that's going to be popcorn, prime time already slotted, and the NFL audience nation will be watching. Great stuff from that one. The final NFC wildcard weekend game is the Monday Nighter. Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the beat-up Philadelphia Eagles, and that will conclude all of wildcard weekend. Once we get through those and previews and recaps, all those things for you guys, we will have divisional round stuff coming up. So that's just a really look to the road ahead for what our shows are going to look like. To finish this one off, we're sitting about a 32-minute mark. I think all we want to discuss, guys, is the head coaching decisions that have already been made. They're, like I said, sure to be more to come. But news today broke of a couple of firings and 2 that we really we couldn't have been less surprised with. I think we all said it in the Week 18 preview show that these guys were coaching their last games, and sure enough, we were right. It was only 24 hours, not even, before each of these guys get fired. The first one I'm talking of is Arthur Smith for the Atlanta Falcons, getting whooped by the Saints in Week 18, a 7-10 season, bit underwhelming considering the schedule they had to play with this season. Arthur Smith, man, never a winning season there, but at the same time, you can say he never really had a quarterback to lean on as well. What do you take from the Arthur Smith tenure in Atlanta? Where do they move going forward from here? What do you guys think?
I think Arthur Smith, the story that you would have for him is high expectations. He had the offense, the Derrick Henry and all that he ran in Tennessee. He was supposed to bring that over, and the Atlanta Falcons were going to have this rushing attack and play good defense behind it, and it was just going to be this Tennessee remake. And, I think it had some promise at one point in time, but the problem was not the idea, not the strategy or anything like that. It was the execution of such. He was trying to outsmart himself, it seemed like. He was consistently trying to, go down the unbeaten path and try to invent the wheel. You had good players, get the ball in their hands and let them work. And he failed to do that. I don't understand how you can fail to get the ball into your playmakers' hands week in and week out, but he found a way to do it. And that's really why he ended up getting fired. That's why the success wasn't there, because you saw spurts of this team putting it together. And it might have been a quarter in a game. It might have been 2 quarters in a game. Heck, they had some pretty solid performances altogether. But when you funnel that with your quarterback making back-breaking mistakes consistently, and Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder, you end up with a nasty equation here that's going to equate to a bunch of losses in games where you probably should have won. You probably gained more yards than they did. You probably turned the ball over less than they did, and you still will lose. You gotta win in the margins, and that's something Arthur Smith could not do.
No,
What
yeah,
are your
I agree
thoughts,
with
Christian?
you. My big thing is I think it's the FedEx in him, man. He can't deliver like Amazon Prime, that prime shipping. So, nah, on a real note, man, I just think really the big thing for me is, the Panthers loss in the rain. That's a tough one. And then the Chicago snow game. So, granted, those are hard games to win, but I mean, like y'all said, the schedule was not that hard for you. And y'all did play the Saints. I understand it was in November. You won that game, but what was coming into this game, and it just doesn't look like he had his guys prepared. And that's not just been that. Just really, I'm not going to beat the drum too hard, but it's what Brian said. We preached it on this pod. Any episode, just get your playmakers the ball. It blows my mind that you have, a running back that for some reason you're subbing them out, then your backup's having the big play. I just don't understand what's going on there. Then you got your wide receiver, Kyle Pitts. You're just not giving them the ball. So, you could blame maybe coaching, but ultimately, we'll see. I think next year, hopefully they get a quarterback, and we'll see more so. Was it Arthur Smith's fault, or was the quarterback play just that bad while he was there?
Yeah, it seems like those two things kind of hand in hand in marriage there. I think the Falcons are in a fine space moving forward. They need to hit on a quarterback for sure. I don't know if this is going to be a veteran free agent acquisition, a trade. I would hope so. If they're the way they're picking, the spot they're going to be picking it, I don't think there's a rookie quarterback to come in at that spot and propel them to a playoff type team. So finding that QB in the free agency market or trade market, whoever you got to do it with, is going to be the key for the Falcons this offseason. The team we're going to pay a lot of attention to. And speaking of this next team, we already kind of previewed it in the preview show for Week 18. We have to pay a lot of attention this offseason to the Washington Commanders. They just fired Ron Rivera. No surprise there. I think we pretty much saw the writing on the wall at the end of last season. We get all the way till the end of this one. They rack up 4 wins. Sam Howell, you still don't know if he's the guy. He had spurts, but second half of the year was pretty bad. Turnovers and getting sacked left and right. So you don't know what you're doing there, but you are picking number 2, I believe, in the draft overall. So you can hit a home run, change your franchise by getting A-plus type the guy pick with that number 2 selection. But the major thing is going to be bringing in the head coach that can get this offense right and get the offensive line gelling better and the defense better, since they've traded away some great players and revamped that as well. So you've already heard names flying around. I know Mike McDonald was the Ravens DC was looked at as a possible interview later as the playoffs roll on. There's going to be a ton of guys getting interviewed for that job. Where does Washington go from here, guys? Because Ron Rivera, he's been a coach in the game for a long time, but it was clear his time in Washington was never going to be anything exciting. They never really got close to flirting with playoff spots under his tenure there. So what do they do? Who do they bring in? Do they make a change at quarterback? Who are they drafting at number 2? What are these things? What are your feelings on some of these questions surrounding Washington, guys?
I think the position that they're in and kind of the roster life cycle, if you will, is they're ready for a complete teardown and rebuild. And especially if you look at their division and being Dallas in a win now mode, Philadelphia in a win now mode, and the Giants, I don't know what they're going to do, but they're not a very good team. But if you look at the Commanders, they're kind of devoid of talent. They're unsure at the quarterback position. The offensive line's not great. They got some aging players on the offensive line. They got Brian Robinson. Sure, he's a good player, but is he really a surefire difference maker, franchise running back? I wouldn't say so. I think he's a quality running back, not a difference making running back. Then you got Terry McLaurin, who's a good receiver, starting to get up in age, and you got a couple other pieces such as Jahan Dotson. Then you got your first round pick from Emmanuel Forbes. He did not play well this year, and you got your 2 interior guys on the defense line. Other than that, you do not have a lot. So I think that this is a good opportunity to tear it down, accumulate draft picks, trade off the star players on your roster, bring in GM, head coach, and really start this thing from the ground up and see what you got in a couple years.
Yeah, I agree with you. My big thing about just not really Washington in their direction, just Ron Rivera, other than his 1 year with the Panthers and went 11-1, the Super Bowl run, he's always been mediocre. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, really, he was worse than mediocre with Washington. I mean, he was there for 4 seasons, 26 wins, 40 losses, and 1 tie. With the Panthers, that's when, I mean, you say he got his job. Overtime with them, what was it? I just seen it. I think it was like 90 wins, 82 losses. So, I mean, the guy's never, I mean, you can say a true winner. Just he's a locker room guy, glue guy. He gets in any franchise. And at the time they hired him, Washington was burning to the ground. I think that's what more so the hire was for, to kind of get them back on their feet, which you can argue maybe he did his job technically, but I mean, my big thing about what Brian said too is, I mean, when they traded both their edge rushers this year, that shows me all I need to know about this team. They are going for the rebuild. They're tearing this thing down. I expect a new quarterback to be coming in here. A lot of pieces getting probably out of here, and more trades for guys leaving, and then seeing if they can bring some younger pieces in maybe. But it's really the sign that they go in is one, this joint ownership. I know it's Magic Johnson connection. They're talking about hiring another guy from the NBA to come in here and try to change things up. But I think it's really going to determine on who their head coach is. That says a lot about what their next step will be and what kind of team they're going to be moving forward, to really say what they're going to be in these next couple of years moving forward. But hopefully with the new ownership, we'll see a lot better things. I mean, with the ownership that was there, we don't have to talk long about it because people know who he was. Ownership was terrible there, and I think the fan base knows that for a fact. And now I think it's time, like Brian said, just restart everything and just see what's going to happen moving forward with a new head coach and this ownership together, walking hand to hand and really try to make this a better team.
Yeah, really, to speak on both of those, as far as my childhood, as far as back as I can remember, Washington has never really been a powerhouse. They've always been second, third fiddle to Philadelphia and Dallas in that division. The Giants have their 2 Super Bowls under Eli Manning. So Washington's just, until it's one of those kind of, until I see it, I'll believe it things with that franchise. They've just been underwater for so long, it feels like. So, but I mean, Brian, yeah, you're pointing to your Dolphins here as a fan of a team that was really in the same state post Dan Marino. They treaded water and had a few magical seasons, a few playoff berths, but nothing really deep and long-term solution as far as what a franchise was looking for.
Significant.
Significant. Yeah. So Washington, they got to figure that out. Like I said, I'll believe it when I see it. Atlanta, at least they had success in the Matt Ryan era. They were pretty much getting playoff berths almost every year, especially when he had a decent line in front of him. And they made a run as a Super Bowl 1 year, his MVP year. So I have a little faith they can work some things around in a weaker division. You don't have a powerhouse like Dallas or Philadelphia to deal with, and get back on track fairly quickly if they have a good draft, make a good hire, and find a quarterback that's worth anything. So interesting stuff. Any other coaching news you care to touch on, guys, before we get out of here?
I think that's the big ones. Of course, there are several we touched on earlier, the defensive staff for the Jaguars being fired, but what other ones happened?
Oh, the Giants DC kind of just like he left on his own. Yeah. So I expect him, honestly, to get a job somewhere or be a DC somewhere else, to be honest with you.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing that happened with Wink when he parted ways with the Ravens. The Ravens were looking to move in a different direction, and he's a very respected guy. He had talented groups. The Giants, I believe, tied the Ravens this year for most takeaways. So, despite the talent being lacking, he found a way to still keep them a semi decent unit. Sure to be at least a DC coach in his coaching job in his future somewhere, better than New York, I would suppose. He may even get head coaching interviews because he's a pretty good players coach as well. There's going to be a ton of things circling this offseason. We'll get a clearer picture as the playoffs go along and some of the teams actually get a chance to interview guys they want to interview. If you have not, listeners, please go back and listen to our Last Takes episode. We discussed each team in the NFL and whether we think that they were going to be moving in different directions for the head coaching circles and whatnot. What was that, Brian? What were you trying to show me?
I was just seeing if it would pull up. I don't know if you guys can see that at all. I don't think you can.
No, it's just a white screen, brother. What is it?
I was going to just talk about it to you guys at the pod, but if we got a second here, it's WAR lost to injuries. I don't know if you guys know what that is. Wins above replacement.
As a baseball guy, yeah. Trust me, as a baseball guy, I know all about the WAR. I'm telling you right now, it's making its waves in NFL circles now, rightfully so.
So the offensive WAR lost. Who do you think leads the NFL?
Ooh, I would imagine you're probably going to say
Chargers.
Miami because
No.
logistically thinking or logically thinking, Minnesota was without their quarterback and best receiver for a good chunk of the year. The Jets were without their way better quarterback for all of the season. I would lean those two teams off the top of my head, but who do you have for us?
Including quarterbacks. So including quarterbacks, everything else. So Baltimore first had the most. Yep. Ronnie's your left tackle, your backup running back, Mark Andrews. That's a lot right there.
Significant pieces.
Yeah.
Next man up, though, baby.
Chargers were second, Panthers third, Saints fourth, Dolphins fifth. Now you can't see it. I'll send it in the group chat, but Miami was first on the defensive side of the ball by a lot. Like they're off the grid. And then
Jalen Ramsey is big part of that.
And Phillips.
Yes, that's this pod we discussed it, and I understand your feelings here, Brian. As the second half is really unfolded, and the Bills were able to come back and win this division, a lot due to MetLife and taking Jalen Phillips, who was in the midst of a career year, and week 17 you lose back Bradley Chubb, your next best pass rusher on the outside. So things don't look inspiring for the defensive unit. But I will say, holding Josh Allen, like you said in the recap portion of this pod, you held Josh Allen to 14 points. I know he made mistakes, but clean the special teams up. Keep finding a way. You're not going to be rushing the passer very well, so that's going to be a challenge. But find a way to force some mistakes against Patrick Mahomes. That's a test. That is a test to make that guy force mistakes. But maybe you force the receivers to make mistakes. And that's very doable.
Be the last thing I touch on.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen did not play a good game.
No.
He literally tried to hand that game to us, and we gave it back to him. But that's neither here nor there. So I'm done.
Yeah, I think week 18, it had a lot of storylines, the divisions changing hands and in both sides or both conferences with the Eagles as well in the East and their fall apart. But I think one thing became clear for me as a Ravens fan. I think us in San Francisco look like the best two teams in football. They're very healthy, but that said, either of them can find themselves getting bounced first round, and there's a lot of good, talented teams in the playoffs. I think each team with a proven quarterback and a quarterback can go out and win you a game, have a shot at this thing. NFL is so great, and it's one of the most random sports as terms of one game sample size in a playoff. Anybody can beat anybody, so I love that about the NFL. The NBA, your top seeds, your best teams are going to win a best out of 7. 90% of the time. It's just the way it goes. So it's been fun. It's been a great regular season, you guys. I appreciate you joining me and recapping all of it. For our listeners, we will be back when we get together for the Wednesday episode extensively previewing each playoff matchup. There's so much to talk about in all of these. Like I said, just in the snippet I gave earlier, the script couldn't have went any better for some of these things. I mean, Matt Stafford's return to Detroit, along those things, man. It's a lot of good stuff to talk about come Wednesday. And as we progress through the playoffs, we'll have a lot to talk about after each game because the world will be watching. We will be watching extensively, and we're going to see which team comes out on top. Hopefully, it's Miami, Baltimore, somehow find a way to meet in the AFC Championship. That'd be a huge stretch considering how things played out and the seeding, just the way the seeding is now. But we're going to touch on those things and just keep our fingers crossed for some good football to watch in this playoff window. So thank you guys for listening. As always, if you could do us a favor, please like, share, subscribe the podcast itself, rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Give us a follow on Twitter. I am at ChaseOwens96. Brian is at Sarver_Brian. Christian at C_Mills241. Give a like and a comment to every YouTube short and Instagram video we get posted for you guys. Let us know how we're doing in that front. Get the algorithm pumping. Until next time on Wednesday for the playoff preview, guys, we will see you then. Until then, peace out. That was messy, but whatever.
Josh Allen's still the daddy.
Oh my God.